These sightings date back many years. Pioneer 1 has as of late broken the colossal quietness by interfacing with a human advancement far past the extent of our imaginative psyche. The presence of an unbelievably progressed outsider species, whose presence challenges every one of our suspicions about existence on planets other than our light blue speck, got explorers' signs stowed away in the boundless bereft of space. With this extraordinary meeting, a brand new chapter in our journey across the universe begins. While Michio Kaku alerts us about this divulgence, the deeply grounded questions that have tortured humankind beginning from the earliest long periods of written history resonation more grounded than any time in ongoing memory. Do we have what it takes to face the awe-inspiring mysteries of space? Furthermore, will we find illumination as we continued looking for understanding or release powers outside of our reach? Show up with us as we investigate how Explorer 1 came into contact with a high-level outsider species. No one could have expected quite a while ago that the Pioneer 1 transport would continue to accept an essential part in our planetary gatherings examination of the outside planets. Even after all this time, the fact that the probe is still sending information about how it got back to Earth suggests that something is working properly. The correspondence from Pilgrim presents a questionable, anyway conceivably remunerating future. The Pioneer 1 missions took advantage of a novel game plan of the outside planets that happens just once as expected. This course of action licenses space mechanical assembly to gravitationally slingshot beginning with one planet then onto the following, making the most capable usage of their confined fuel. While other probes were designed to go beyond Uranus and Neptune, NASA spacecraft were initially designed to go beyond Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter. Despite NASA's need to reduce its objectives due to financial constraints, the two Explorer rockets that were launched were generally very helpful. While Explorer 1 was exclusively centered around the two planets Uranus and Neptune, Explorer 2 had the option to see past Jupiter and Saturn. NASA endorsed the establishment of two brilliant records on the Explorers since it knew that the shuttle would ultimately head out to interstellar space. Sounds going from whale calls to the music of Heave Berry were put prepared, as well as imparted in great greetings in 55 vernaculars if outcasts anytime coincidentally found the bus and were intrigued about their starting points. The sun's situation corresponding to local pulsars, a sort of neutron star, was likewise portrayed on the 12 all-inclusive gold-plated copper circles activity schematics. A trio of radioisotope thermoelectric generators are responsible for converting the thermal energy produced by the radioactive decay of plutonium into electricity that can be used to power the two spacecraft. The 10 logical instruments that were connected to the tests included a magnetometer, a two-camera imaging framework, various spectrometers, and equipment for distinguishing between large beams of high-energy charged particles and low-energy charged particles. There have been an amount of 11 sensible assessments coordinated on board each Pioneer using the correspondence structure to all the more profoundly concentrate on the planets and moons. During the launch of Explorer 1 on September 5, 1977, the rocket almost ran out of fuel, and the shuttle almost never took off. However, despite the test's risk-free launch, Explorer 2 was unable to make up for lost time as it sped past the really space rock belt between Jupiter and Mars. From a distance of 165 million miles, the Voyager 1 spacecraft sent the first images of Jupiter to Earth in April 1978. When Voyager 1 discovered two more moons and a tiny ring around the massive planet in March 1979, NASA was surprised. Explorer 1 additionally caught the huge Galilean moons of Jupiter, Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto exhaustively. Explorer 2, similar to its ancestor, the Trailblazer space apparatus, found that Jupiter's moons were dynamic, independent universes. Explorer 1 likewise revealed charming new data about these normally happening satellites. For example, how Io is modeled with yellow, brown, and orange and has different volcanoes displays that moons, similar to planets, can have dynamic inner parts. In addition, images of Europa taken by Explorer 1 showed a mostly level surface with lines running into it, suggesting that ice and possibly a sea are beneath it. An immense underground territory of liquid water, possibly fit for supporting life like that in the world, is probably clutched by Europa as demonstrated by coming about discernments and assessments. Explorer 1 made a nearby way to deal with Jupiter on Walk 5, 1979, inside 174,000 miles of the fierce cloud tops. Saturn was the next target for the test. For close-up images of Saturn in 1980, scientists only had to wait a year. Incredibly, the ringed planet was much the same way as stacked with shocks as Jupiter. One of Voyager 1's goals was the thin plan seen as only the earlier year by NASA's Pioneer 11 test. Pioneer's more significant standard camera spotted 2 new moons, Prometheus and Pandora, whose circles keep the freezing material in the ring in a described circle. It also took pictures of a few other Saturn moons, the G-ring, the map book, and another ring. The Saturn experience brought the essential mission of Explorer 1 to a nearby location. From that point onward, the center moved to observing the rocket as it sped toward interstellar space. Weighing 1,190 pounds, Pioneer 1 got maybe of the most notable picture in spaceflight history. 20 years earlier, on February 14, 1990, the probe took a picture of its home planet from 3.7 billion miles away by turning back toward Earth. Entity. Why now, then? The photo shows Earth as a little touch suspended in a light emission. The light blue dab picture stands out from the many others Explorer 1 needed that day, including the Sun, 5 planets, and a multi-picture planetary family representation. This fills in as a steady update that Earth is a minuscule spot in a universe that is limitlessly tremendous and immeasurably enormous. Explorer 1 broke free in August 2012 and entered interstellar space, abandoning the heliosphere, the Sun's colossal air pocket of charged particles. The results became noticeable after a solid daylight-based emanation was recorded by Pioneer 1's plasma wave instrument between April 9 and May 22, 2013. Electrons in close proximity to Explorer 1 vibrated as a result of the ejection. Explorer 1's environmental factors, according to scientists, were thicker than those found inside the heliosphere. The fact that electron thickness is higher in interstellar space than in the Sun's area appears to be unrelated. The electron density, on the other hand, is much lower near Earth than at the edge of the heliosphere, according to the researchers. Researchers finally settled on August 25, 2012, as the appropriate launch date after sifting through Explorer 1's data. The electron movements and the Van's readings of charged Sun-based particles both added to fixing the date. On that fateful day, which also happened to be the day that Neil Armstrong, an astronaut on Apollo 11, passed away, the spacecraft detected an increase of 9% in galactic cosmic rays, particles that originate outside of our solar system, and a decrease of 1-fold in these particles. By then, at that point, Pioneer 1 was 11.25 billion miles from the Sun. Since it entered circle, Explorer 1 has been transferring an abundance of valuable data about the interstellar medium. Among its various revelations are check of the extremely raised levels of bombastic radiation and confirmation of the coordinated effort between charged particles delivered by stars and those start from the Sun. Engineers are still in shock of the rocket's abilities. For instance, NASA announced in December 2017 that Explorer 1 had actually positioned itself to use its reinforcement engines to communicate with Earth. The trajectory correction maneuver thrusters were used for the final time when Voyager 1 flew by Saturn in November 1980. The spacecraft's standard attitude control engines became the primary method for bringing it into perfect alignment with Earth from that point on. Notwithstanding, as the mentality control engine started to glitch, NASA chose to test the direction rectification move engines, which might have broadened Explorer 1's functional life. In the end, that test worked. The mission team has made additional advancements to extend Explorer 1's lifespan. Because of the camera's failure to catch a lot of light in space, they were handicapped soon after the light blue spot picture was taken to assist with protecting Explorer 1's restricted power supply. An additional 5 intelligent instruments have been incapacitated by the mission bunch moreover. In addition, Voyager 1 stopped sending data to Earth in November of last year, indicating that it was not collecting any scientific or engineering data. It's hard to fix the problem with the most separated rocket in the universe. NASA ran into problems when the test suddenly stopped sending data about the stuff between stars. Because the shuttle is 15 billion miles away and moving at 32,000 miles per hour, orders from mission regulators take 22.5 hours to reach the small test, and the design team must wait the same amount of time for a response. The issue has been under NASA's attention for more than 5 months. The primary goal for spring was to give the spacecraft a computerized jab. This is similar to how a dentist finds cavities in teeth with air puffs. The NASA bunch sent a request to the rocket encouraging it to move a full memory readout back to Earth, underlining any faltering parts. The Flight Data Subsystem, one of Voyager's 3 onboard computers, is in charge of packaging the science and engineering data prior to sending it back to Earth. This chip contained the issue that Pokémon reported. Because of the bug, the PC was making reiterating prattle containing matched ones and zeros, giving the inclination that it was stuck as opposed to giving science, temperature, and planning data. Since NASA expected to become inventive in light of the fact that the wrecked chip couldn't be displaced, this is where things get fascinating. At the present time, the correspondence difficulties Voyager experienced were pardoned. Yet a new, genuinely terrifying mystery had begun to make. The remarkable new signals were completely unexpected. Right when the sign was first recognized, it was incredibly feeble, yet it constantly turned out to be more grounded and all the more clear. The researchers initially assumed that it was some kind of obstruction, but after examining it, they realized that it was a real sign. The message despises anything they had any time experienced. It seemed to have a solicitation, similar to it was a kind of correspondence. From the start, researchers figured it very well may be an issue with the rocket. However, subsequent to doing a ton of examination, they observed that the sign was coming from a distant spot a long ways past the nearby planet group. The sign was not of normal start. It was a well-planned and purposeful transmission. But precisely where? The pursuit began. Scientists all around the planet were in a frenzy endeavoring to disentangle the sign. The Pioneer test had sent back various things, at this point at the same time not by any stretch like this. It was the groundbreaking disclosure. Nevertheless, despite the enthusiasm, there was also a sense of fear. What did this mean? Whoever was attempting to communicate with us out there was a person or